Hi, it's Penny here, and today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in March. As usual, I'm going to do this book battle style, which means I pair up all the books, I battle them against each other until we come up with the best book of the month. In March, I read 9 books. Most of them were fantasy, but there's a couple of other ones as well. So let's get into talking about the books. First up, we've got Dragon's Fire by McCaffrey and Todd McCaffrey up against Fool's Quest by Robin Hobb. So Dragon's Fire is the 19th book in the Dragons of Pern series. This is around where Todd McCaffrey has started to take over from Anne McCaffrey, and I can't tell yet whether he's having much of an influence on the way these books are written. They still feel very similar to me. Although also I realized that I skipped over book 18, and I'm not sure if that made a difference. In a lot of ways, these books are written that you can read them in any order because it kind of jumps around in the chronology of the world. Although there are certain bigger events that make sense to read in order. So I try to generally read them in order so that when I hear about a certain character, I'll know everything I'm supposed to know about them. But annoyingly, I can't get an audiobook of book 18 anywhere, so I skipped one. Anyway, if you haven't heard about the Dragons of Pern series, it's set on this planet where at irregular periods, often hundreds of years long, this thread falls from the sky and anything it touches it destroys, but they do have dragons, and the dragons are able to shoot this out of the sky before it lands, hence saving everyone. But because it happens at such irregular intervals, sometimes people forget what dragons are for, and the dragon riders have a tough time of it, whereas in general they're trying to help everybody out. That said, this book doesn't really have many dragon riders in it at all. We're following this trainee Harper who happens to be mute. He takes it upon himself to become a spy for the shunned, these people who've been exiled, and a lot of them now are resorting to crime in order to survive. And as well, you get another perspective from one of the children being raised by the shunned. There's also another weird plot in there about these watchwares, which are kind of like smaller guard dog dragons, and the last queen watchware is laying her eggs. So I did feel like there were a few too many things going on in this book, and they weren't really woven together as much as I think they would have needed to be for this book to really work. So I ended up feeling quite fractured. I do find that often the writing style for these books isn't my favorite, but because the world building is so good, usually the plot can still pull me in and make me engaged by the end. Unfortunately, in this one, I just never quite got engaged in what was happening. I just remembered another plot thread that was happening, which was all around this mining and this dangerous firestone and trying to find a replacement for that. There was just too many things happening for me to even remember. So great world building. I really think Anne McCaffrey, and hopefully now Todd McCaffrey, does a really great job of world building and investigating these really real life themes through this world that she's created. But this one, not quite it for me. Then the next book in this battle is Fool's Quest by Robin Hobb. This is the second to last book in the Realm of the Elderlings, which I feel like I've been reading forever. It's the second book in the Fool and the Fitz trilogy. So we're back with Fitz, who we met in the very first trilogy when he was a young orphan, the bastard son of the king in waiting, who ended up being trained as an assassin. At this point, he's much older and he has had a few children put into his care, and unfortunately, some really awful things happen to them in this particular book. Which, I mean, often in the Realm of the Elderlings, really awful things happen, but this one involves children, so I think that makes it even worse. Unfortunately, I really wanted from this one, like, a really emotional vengeance plot. I wanted Fitz to be running off to save these children and just doing whatever needed to be done to make them safe, and I didn't exactly get that story. I do think there were some other themes that were really well explored, like grief, and there's been a lot of development in the magic systems, and Fitz has kind of built up this family around him, and it's really great to see all these characters and the relationships they're building. And I guess it's also great that Fitz has now matured a lot and he's able to make much more responsible decisions. However, in this case, I didn't want him to make responsible decisions. I wanted him to just go and destroy these people. So I was a little bit disappointed. As well, it kind of ended in the middle of a whole new thing that it was introducing, and while I was still excited for that thing, I feel like there is a lot to be wrapped up in the last book. So no wonder it's like a 45-hour audiobook, that last book. But I'm going to be getting to that this month. I'm still very excited about it. And I feel like this sounded like a negative review, but I still do really love spending time with Fitz and seeing how he reacts to things. So if I'm putting these two books up against each other, I would say they both disappointed me a little bit. However, I was much more engaged in Fool's Quest. So I'm going to put Fool's Quest through to the next round. Okay, then our next battle will be between The Blood Mirror by Brent Weeks and Blood Rites by Jim Butcher. So The Blood Mirror is the 4th book in the Lightbringer series. I've just got one more book of that series to read as well. Another one that I'll be getting to in April. The Lightbringer is set in this world where people are able to use this color-based magic. Certain people are able to draw on colors and use them for different magical abilities. Kind of each color aligns with a different magical ability. Most people can only use one color. Some people are special and can use more. And there's this one religious figure called the Black Prism who's able to use all the colors of the light. But we start the series with the current Black Prism not being who everybody thinks he is. We've also got this orphan child who has been brought into things, another girl who has more of a secret magical ability, and the love interest of the Black Prism who had trained as a warrior but who has now found herself in a position of power. So those are the 4 main characters that we're following in this 4th book, although there's also a lot of side characters with things going on as well. I do think in this particular book most of our characters were split up and in completely different locations, and I think I didn't enjoy it quite as much because of that. There were still some very big reveals in this book. I've said before that every book in this series has kind of taken things to a whole nother level, and this did that again, but because our characters were all split up, the impacts of that weren't as obvious, and I felt like it made it feel less complex and twisty, which has been something I've really enjoyed about this series. Also, one of our main characters spends his whole time pretty much on the front line of this war, and I've again said before, I don't tend to enjoy books that are very focused on the tactics of war and the actual fighting of war. I'd rather be following characters who are trying to avoid war, because that's what I think we should be doing. So anyway, I did enjoy this, but I will say I don't think it was my favorite book of this series. I am, though, very excited to see how the series is going to wrap up. Then we've got Blood Rites by Jim Butcher. This is I want to say it's the 6th book in the Harry Dresden files. Let's go with it being number 6. So Harry Dresden is a wizard and he's also a private investigator, so he takes on different magical crime investigations, but at the same time he's kind of having difficulties with the Wizard Council, as well as at the moment being stuck in the middle of this vampire war. In book number 6, unfortunately, he gets called into this erotic film set to try and protect some people who are being targeted by some kind of magical villain. And what I have always disliked about this series is that Harry Dresden has this thing about protecting all women, but he does it in such a way where it kind of stops women from being people. And all the time when he's in the middle of battles, he'll stop to like ogle their breasts and stuff like that. And I kind of hate Harry a lot. And obviously putting him on an erotic film set, he did that some more, and he also kind of had some little speeches about it. He did some really hypocritical things where he protected evil women while letting terrible things happen to innocent women, which really makes no sense. However, there were some things that happened in this book that kind of progressed the bigger story and give us some more information about Harry's history and some other secrets that are going on, and I did enjoy those parts of the story. So I have to admit that it didn't annoy me as much as I was expecting it to. So I am going to continue the series. I think there's like 17 books in the series so far, but my library does have all the audiobooks, so I'll probably just keep going at this point, because sometimes I kind of like them. However, if I'm putting these two books up against each other, The Blood Mirror is still such a complex world with so many great characters. I really love the tone of the writing, and I feel like there's so much more potential to the story. So for that reason, I'm going to put The Blood Mirror through to the next round. Then we've got Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline up against One of Us Is Next by Karen M. McManus. Ready Player 2 is the sequel to Ready Player 1. Like a lot of people, I really enjoyed Ready Player 1. We've got this world where everything's kind of shit, but most people spend their time in this virtual world called the Oasis. The owner of the Oasis dies and he leaves behind a quest, and whoever can solve the quest first will get to inherit all his riches. So we're following the character who wins. You know right from the start that he wins, but now in the second book he's kind of deciding what to do with his life after he wins, and there's this new technology that he has the option of releasing into the world, and basically he makes a lot of really terrible decisions about it. He's written as a completely unlikable character, which is so different from the first book. So I just felt like the initial setup and the way the character had been changed really meant the beginning was awful. I hated it. But once we got into the quest, I actually found it quite fun and the pacing was really good. It was just whenever it would drop out of the quest parts to talk about the character and kind of their relationships with people and their emotions, those bits were awful. Also, right at the end, it brought in this other concept which I thought was so interesting and had so much potential, and I think it was such a wasted potential because why wasn't that included in the rest of the book? And now, right now, I'm thinking, is he going to write a third book? Because maybe a third book with this new thing that was brought up at the end could be interesting. But also, probably not. Because it could never be that same kind of story as the first book was. So really, I just think it was so hard to find a setup that would allow you to have the same kind of fun quest as you had in the first book and the second book. And even though the quest was fun, everything around the quest sucked, and so I think he shouldn't have bothered. Then we've got One of Us is Next. So this is the sequel to One of Us is Lying. In One of Us is Lying, we had a bunch of teens in detention, and by the end of detention, one of them was dead, and the rest of them all became murder suspects. I really enjoyed that, especially the relationships and the characters, so I decided to pick up the sequel. The sequel primarily follows their younger siblings and some of the other people they go to school with, and this time someone starts a truth or dare type game at their school where you get a text and you have to choose truth or dare within the next 24 hours, or otherwise a truth will be revealed about you. But actually I don't feel like that was the important part of the story, even though it did lead to some exciting things. I really just think what I like about these stories is these teens being put in a difficult situation. They've got some difficult personal experiences that they're going through, and all this other drama around that really just gives them a framework to experience their journey and figure out what they're doing with their lives. And I really liked it. I am surprised how much I liked it. I just think the way that Karen M. McManus writes teen angst is, it feels very genuine, and everything they were going through felt very relatable, and I just felt very invested. And in this one, the first person doesn't die until halfway through the book, and it also doesn't tell you who's died straight away. And I just at that point couldn't put it down because I needed to know what was going to happen. I needed to know that everyone was going to be okay. I felt really engaged in working out the murder mystery, and there was a fair amount of action as well, which I really enjoyed. So I'm super excited because there is going to be a third book in the series coming out next year, and I am definitely going to read it. So if I'm putting this up against Ready Player 2, which was a stupid setup, nothing that happened in it felt realistic in any way. I didn't care about the characters at all. They didn't feel like fully formed people. Their emotions weren't realistic or well explained. Honestly, it's obvious. One of Us is Next is going to go through to the next round. Okay, now I've got 3 books left, and I keep arguing with myself about how I want to group them. So how about I just tell you about all 3? That will totally ruin my format when I'm editing this, but I'm just going to tell you about all 3 and then we'll pick a winner. So we've got Skulduggery Pleasant by Derek Landy up against Karen's School Picture by Katy Farina and The Girl from the Other Side Volume 11 by Nagabe. So firstly, Skulduggery Pleasant. This is a series where I suspect it starts out more middle grade and then moves towards being more YA as it continues. I think there's 14 books in the series in total, so I really shouldn't have started this considering I'm supposed to be trying to finish all the series I have in progress. But I also think these are just really quick, fun reads, or at least that's what I'm expecting for the rest of the series. We're primarily following this girl named Stephanie, and her uncle dies and leaves her some inheritance. And at that point, she discovers that he was involved in this whole magical world. She ends up in a bit of danger and gets some help from Skulduggery Pleasant, who is like this animated skeleton man. And he basically ends up being her guide and protector as she joins this magical world and kind of finds out everything about what's going on. I can definitely see why a lot of people would have loved reading this when they were younger. It's just a really great introduction to magic. The characters have some really great banter, as well as there being lots of other different magical ideas introduced. And I think as well some of the things that Stephanie experiences are the kind of things that you fantasize happening to yourself when you're younger, and maybe when you're older too. So I thought it was a lot of fun and I really enjoyed it. Then we've got Karen's School Picture. So these are the graphic novel adaptations of the original Babysitter's Club Little Sister books. Now when I was younger, I mostly read the Babysitter's Club books, but I did read a few of the Babysitter's Club Little Sister books, and this was one of the ones that I specifically remember reading because in it, Karen gets glasses. In fact, in the original, she gets a pink pair of glasses and a blue pair of glasses, and when I was a kid, even though I didn't really want glasses, because I knew I wouldn't get glasses that cool, still, the idea of getting pink glasses and blue glasses was amazing to me. I was super jealous. So I was a bit disappointed that in the graphic novel adaptation, she only gets pink glasses, one pair of glasses. She also gets bullied, and I don't know that I totally thought the way bullying was represented and the way Karen dealt with it was the best, but I guess it was fine. The main lesson was really about the fact that you're still you, even if you get glasses, and it doesn't matter, which I guess is a good lesson, although I don't think it was something I worried about when I was a kid at all. But maybe that was because I read this book when I was really young. And I do enjoy these graphic novel adaptations. I think they're really bright and colourful and they get the story across. And I'm enjoying reading the rest of them. I don't know how many they're going to be. Oh, there was actually one other thing. It's interesting because these graphic novel adaptations are kind of being released like each book of the Babysitter's Club books at around the same time as the Babysitter's Club Little Sister ones. Maybe Babysitter's Club Sister's a little bit behind, but I think originally these series were very out of step because the Babysitter's Club books had been going for quite a long time before they started the Babysitter's Club Little Sister. I'll do some research and give you some information here. But in one of the Babysitter's Club books, Christy's family adopts this young Vietnamese girl. And in this Karen graphic novel, basically Emily is mentioned in like 2 panels. Like, oh, and there's Emily as well as my new sister. But she hasn't been mentioned in the Babysitter's Club graphic novel adaptations yet. So it's kind of weird to be like, oh yeah, and I got a new sister, but like, we're going to talk about a school picture and some glasses instead of talking about my new sister. It was a bit weird, but still not an issue for me because I've read all the Babysitter's Club books. That's not true. I actually think I've probably only read about 50% of them because there are so many of them. Maybe 60%. At some point, I'll try and read them all. But anyway, I know a lot about what happens in the Babysitter's Club, so I wasn't confused by that. And it was just a really nostalgic experience, as it always is with these books. Then I read The Girl from the Other Side, volume 11. So this is the last book in the series where we've got this young girl being looked after by this scary demon type guy. In the very first book, you have no idea what's going on, but slowly you learn more and more. And I would say things become clearer. However, there's also some elements that don't become clear. And this last volume was mostly dealing with that stuff. And honestly, I don't know that I fully understood what happened. And I don't know, like it kind of doesn't matter that I don't understand what happened. It's kind of wrapped up regardless. But also like, is it wrapped up? Because I still don't know exactly what was going on. But also I don't care because in that last book, the young girl wasn't really around anymore, like kind of, but not really. And it's just almost like a completely different vibe from the original books. So I'm glad that I finished the series, but it kind of went in a weird direction at times. So overall, I don't know how I feel about the series. And that last book, I probably could have not read it and just pretend that I finished the series. Anyway, if I'm putting these 3 books up against each other, I think that I would probably pick Skulduggery Pleasant to go through to the next round, just because I think it was really solidly written and I had a lot of fun reading it. Alright, so now we'll be on to the semi-finals. Our first battle is going to be between Fool's Quest by Robin Hobb and The Blood Mirror by Brent Weeks. So these two books had a lot in common. They're both the second to last books in the series. They both kind of disappointed me a little bit in terms of what I was expecting from the series, because they've both been series that I really loved. There's a lot of complexity in both stories. There's some really cool magic being explored. But I think I'm going to judge this battle based on the character development and the relationships. So for that reason, I'm going to put Fool's Quest through to the next round, because I just think Robin Hobb always does that amazingly. So even though I didn't get everything I wanted from this book, those were the parts that made me still enjoy the journey of reading it. And then we've got One of Us Is Next by Karen M. McManus up against Skulduggery Pleasant by Derek Landy. So both of these were really well written, but Skulduggery Pleasant is kind of more targeted at a more of a middle grade or very young YA kind of level. And One of Us Is Next is more of, I guess, general YA level. Also, I will say One of Us Is Next really reminded me a lot of some of the Christopher Pike books that I used to read in my actual teens. I definitely think I would have loved One of Us Is Next and One of Us Is Lying when I was a teen, but I still really loved them as an adult. Whereas Skulduggery Pleasant, even though it was a lot of fun, I wouldn't say I loved it, just because the characters, again, it comes back to character development. The characters were so well developed in One of Us Is Next. So for that reason, I'm going to put One of Us Is Next through to the next round. And the next round is going to be the finals. So we've just got two books to put up against each other. We've got Fool's Quest by Robin Hobb up against One of Us Is Next by Karen M. McManus. And I know that you're all going to be expecting me to choose Fool's Quest, because I almost always choose a Robin Hobb book when they're in these battles, because I just love Robin Hobb books so much. But I was just a little bit disappointed in this one. I still love the reading experience. It made me cry. I can't wait to see what's going to happen next. And for both of these audiobooks, I couldn't stop listening. I just kept listening to them, even though I was supposed to be doing other things. So I definitely recommend the audiobooks for both of these. And I recommend both of these. I really loved both of these. However, I was just a little bit more satisfied with One of Us Is Next. I got everything I wanted from that book. And maybe it was because I was ready for One of Us Is Next to not live up to the previous book in the series. I was ready for it to disappoint me, whereas I had very high hopes for Fool's Quest. Maybe I set it up for failure. But regardless, I got everything I wanted from One of Us Is Next. So for that reason, I'm going to pick it as the best book of the month. Honestly, it was kind of a weird month with a few disappointing reads that I had high hopes for, and also a few books that I had low expectations of that weren't as bad as I thought they might be. But anyway, as usual, do let me know if you've read any of these books, because I would love to talk with you about them down in the comments, or also let me know if you're interested in reading any of them. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.